A woman climbs the stairs of her empty apartment. The sound of her footsteps echoes off the walls. She turns on the television before even taking off her coat. She doesn't turn it on to watch anything in particular, just to fill the void. The silence of her own home has become unbearable. This scene is repeated millions of times every day around the world. In the house next door, a man wakes up and the first thing he does is reach for his cell phone. With his eyes still half closed, he is already consuming information, notifications, anything that takes his mind out of its natural state of waking up, as if waking up to himself were a threat. There is a silent epidemic happening right under our noses. We don't talk about it because it lives exactly where no one wants to look, inside our own heads. It is the growing inability to bear one's own company, the chronic escape from oneself. When was the last time you spent 5 minutes completely alone with your thoughts? No music, no screen, no book, nothing but the sound of your own breathing and the natural movement of your mind. If that question triggers something close to panic, you are living what South Korean philosopher Byung-Chul calls the tired society, where our own consciousness has become a source of discomfort. The strange thing is that our ancestors lived most of their lives in inner silence. They walked for miles thinking. They worked the land immersed in contemplation. Boredom was a natural, almost sacred state, the space where creativity and wisdom were born. Today, boredom has become synonymous with personal failure. Something fundamental has broken in the relationship we have with ourselves. Our mind, which should be our most intimate refuge, has become a prison from which we compulsively escape. And what is most disturbing, this escape is sold as freedom, as connection, as evolution. But there is a profound scientific and philosophical reason for this transformation. An explanation that connects our ancestral biology with the invisible architecture of modern life. A theory that reveals how we have been systematically trained to fear the silence of our own souls. The answer lies in understanding how our most primitive human nature has been hijacked by a society that profits from our inability to be at peace with ourselves. Imagine a moth encountering a light bulb for the first time. For millions of years, its species used moonlight to navigate the darkness, a perfect, reliable, eternal system, until the world was filled with artificial lights. Now it flies in circles around a light bulb, exhausted, lost, unable to understand why its internal navigation system is leading it to its death. This image is not just a biological curiosity. It is a disturbing mirror of the human condition in the 21st century. Biologist Nicholas Tinbergen discovered something revolutionary while studying seemingly irrational behaviors in nature. He noticed that animals often prefer exaggerated artificial stimuli to the natural stimuli they evolved with. Birds feed dolls with giant mouths instead of their own chicks. Fish attack pieces of red-painted wood more aggressively than real rivals. Tinbergen called this a superstimulus, an amplified artificial version of natural triggers that our brains recognize as important for survival. The problem is that our minds evolved for a world that no longer exists. For hundreds of thousands of years, the human brain developed in environments where stimuli were scarce and valuable. A bright color could mean ripe fruit, a high-pitched sound, imminent danger, a new face, an opportunity for alliance or reproduction. Every stimulus carried information vital to survival. Our neurotransmitters were calibrated for a world of sensory scarcity, where every novelty deserved our full attention. Our ancestors lived immersed in long periods of low stimulation. They walked in silence for hours. They worked with their hands while their minds wandered freely. Boredom was not a problem to be solved. It was the default state of human consciousness, where deep insights and creativity emerged naturally. Think of the shepherd who spent entire days alone with his flock. His mind was not empty. It was deeply active, processing subtle observations, creating connections, developing an intuitive wisdom about life. Silence was not absence. It was heightened presence. Solitude was not isolation. It was intimate communion with oneself. They didn't need to find time to meditate because contemplation was the natural backdrop of existence. They didn't have to disconnect to reconnect with themselves because they were never disconnected in the first place. Introspection was not a spiritual practice. It was a natural consequence of human life. But then something unprecedented in evolutionary history happened. We created a world saturated with superstimuli, colors more vibrant than any fruit, sounds more intense than any predator, faces more attractive than any possible natural mate, information more abundant than any environment could offer. Every screen you look at contains more visual stimuli than your ancestors processed in weeks. Every social network features more human faces than they knew in a lifetime. Every newsfeed carries more drama and urgency than they experienced in decades. And our primitive brain, like the moth to the flame, can't distinguish between the natural stimulus it evolved for and its amplified artificial version. It simply responds with the same desperate urgency that ensured our survival for millennia. Only now, that urgency never ends. The result is a completely new form of exhaustion, not the physical fatigue of someone who has worked hard, but the neural exhaustion of a mind that has been bombarded by stimuli that never stop coming, an existential fatigue that no amount of sleep can cure. It's as if our soul is constantly running a marathon with no finish line. Every notification on your phone is a super stimulus disguised as a social necessity. Every saturated color on your screen is an artificially amplified evolutionary trigger. Every like, every comment, every new piece of information activates the same neural circuits that our ancestors used to identify threats or opportunities for survival. The difference is that our ancestors processed perhaps 10 important stimuli per day. You process more than 10,000. Your brain treats each one with the same evolutionary seriousness, as if your life depended on it. Because from a neural point of view, it does. Except now, those circuits never rest. They never stop firing. And our minds, exhausted from processing an infinite amount of irrelevant stimuli, develop a strange aversion to silence. Because in silence, they have to face their own fatigue. Stillness becomes synonymous with confrontation with our inner exhaustion. What our ancestors called contemplation, we call anxiety. What they experienced as inner peace, we experience as unbearable emptiness. Our deepest human nature has become a source of discomfort. And most disturbing of all, this transformation was not accidental. It was systematically constructed by a society that discovered how to monetize our inability to be at peace with ourselves. An entire economy is built on our escape from contemplative solitude. There is a kind of violence that leaves no visible marks. It does not hurt the body, break bones, or spill blood. It is a violence that operates through seduction, convenience, and the constant promise that you are always just a click away from complete happiness. Byung-Chul calls this positivity violence, a form of social control so subtle that its victims enthusiastically collaborate in their own subjugation. Unlike classic dictatorships which said you can't, this society whispers seductively, you can do anything, but you have to want it intensely. The result is an invisible prison built not with bars but with endless possibilities that never materialize into real satisfaction. Think about the last time you opened social media without a specific reason. You just opened it, like an unconscious reflex, an automatic compulsion. At that moment, something very specific was happening in your brain. You were running away from a discomfort so subtle that you barely noticed its existence. It was the discomfort of being with yourself, the unbearable weight of existing without external distraction, the primitive anxiety of not doing anything productive with your attention. Han realized that modern society has created a new form of tyranny, the tyranny of total transparency. Everything must be visible, quantifiable, optimized. Your steps are counted, your heart rate monitored, your moods mapped by algorithms. You have become transparent to the world, and paradoxically opaque to yourself. The promise was liberation, global connection, unlimited access to information, the possibility of expressing yourself to the whole world. But what really happened was a sophisticated form of alienation. You are more connected than ever to the world, and more disconnected than ever from yourself. Every photo you post is a calculated performance of happiness. Every status update is a careful curation of your existence. You no longer live your life. You produce it as content for others to consume. Your own experience has become raw material to feed an external validation machine that never stops demanding more. And the cruelest part, you do it voluntarily. No one forces you to post, like, comment, or consume. You choose. But it's a choice that has been pre-programmed by a decision-making architecture that knows your evolutionary blind spots better than you do. The disciplinary society of the past controlled you through punishment. The control society monitors you through surveillance. But the transparency society does something even more perverse. It convinces you to control yourself voluntarily, to constantly monitor yourself, to punish yourself for not being productive, creative, happy, and connected all the time. Han speaks of a violence of proximity, the elimination of all contemplative distance necessary for you to see yourself clearly. Everything is always too close, too immediate, too urgent. There is no longer any room for what he calls authentic experience, the kind that arises from slow, silent confrontation with oneself. Your ancestors had secrets they kept to themselves, thoughts they never shared, moments of genuine solitude where they could be completely honest about who they were, without performance, without an audience. That inner privacy was where real individuality was formed. Now you live under constant pressure to be interesting, to have something relevant to say, to always be available for connection. The fundamental right to opacity, to the possibility of being unknown even to yourself, has been abolished in the name of optimized transparency. But perhaps the most devastating aspect of this transparent violence is how it hijacks your capacity for creative boredom. Boredom was the space where profound insights emerged naturally, where your mind, free from external stimuli, could process experiences, form unexpected connections, create genuine meaning. Now at the first sign of boredom, you automatically reach for your phone, like a conditioned reflex, as if boredom were a medical emergency that needs to be immediately treated with a dose of digital stimulation. If you've made it this far without interrupting your reading to check notifications, you're already experiencing something rare, sustained attention on a single experience. Keep going. Your mind is remembering what it's like to exist without constant fragmentation. The question Han raises is disturbing. Are we still capable of authentic experience? Or have we become so transparent, so optimized, so connected that we have completely lost touch with our own inner opacity, that mysterious space where our true individuality used to flourish? The answer isn't in the outside world. It's in the courage to reclaim the right to inner silence, even when, especially when, that silence reveals truths about ourselves we'd rather not face. A woman wakes up at 5 in the morning to meditate before work. She listens to a podcast on productivity over coffee. On her commute, she studies an online course. During lunch, she practices a new language on an app. In the evening, she goes to the gym, then does online therapy, and before bed, she reads about personal development. She collapses into bed exhausted, but not from work, from the impossible project of optimizing herself. This is the new form of slavery that Byung-Chul Han identifies in contemporary society. You have become your own entrepreneur, and the product you produce, sell, and incessantly optimize is your own existence. The difference between the industrial worker of the 20th century and you is staggering. The factory worker knew exactly when work was over. At 5 in the afternoon, he turned off the machine and went home. His personal life was sacred, untouchable by his employer. He could be completely unproductive in his free time without any existential guilt. You never stop working. Even when you're not at the office, you're working on yourself, optimizing your health, expanding your skills, building your network, improving your emotional performance. You have simultaneously become the most demanding employer and the most exploited employee in history. Han calls this the performance society, a system where each individual has internalized the logic of infinite productivity. There is no longer an external boss demanding results from you. You demand it from yourself, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You are the cruelest boss you've ever had. What makes this situation particularly perverse is that it masquerades as freedom. You can be anything you want, they say. Just try hard enough. Invest in yourself. Be the best version of yourself. These phrases sound inspiring, but they carry an implicit violence. If you are not successful, it is your fault. If you are not happy, it is because you have not optimized yourself properly. This is the cruelest of all prisons, one where the prisoner believes he is free and blames himself for not being able to escape on his own. There is a German word that Han uses to describe this phenomenon: Müdigkeitsgesellschaft, the society of fatigue. Not the physical fatigue of those who have worked hard, but the existential exhaustion of those who never stop demanding improvement from themselves. It is a fatigue that cannot be cured by rest because it does not come from the body. It comes from the exhausted soul of being a permanent project. Think about the constant pressure you feel to be productive. Even in moments of leisure, there is an inner voice whispering that you could be using this time more intelligently, reading something uplifting, learning a new skill, networking, exercising, meditating, organizing your life. Genuine leisure, that moment of existing without purpose, without goal, without optimization, has become almost impossible. You feel guilty for not always improving, always growing, always evolving, as if your existence only had value when it was being perfected. Your parents had a simpler life in that regard. They worked to live. You live to work, not just at your job, but on the endless project of becoming the person you're supposed to be. And that ideal person is always just a little out of reach, like a carrot dangling in front of a horse that never stops running. Han realized something devastating. This performance society produces a specific type of depression, not the classic melancholy that came from feeling powerless in the face of the world, but a depression caused by an excess of possibilities, by an overload of responsibility for one's own destiny, when everything depends on you, when every failure is a personal failure, when every moment of unproductivity is wasted time, freedom itself becomes an unbearable burden. You develop what he calls infinite responsibility fatigue. The most tragic thing is that this system feeds on your constant dissatisfaction. The more inadequate you feel, the more you consume products, services, courses, therapies, and apps that promise to help you become the optimized version of yourself. Your chronic inadequacy has become the fuel for an entire economy. Disciplinary society controlled you by telling you you must. Control society monitored you. But performance society did something more sophisticated. It convinced you that you want to control yourself, monitor yourself, discipline yourself. It turned oppression into personal ambition. And now you're stuck in a cruel paradox. The more freedom you have to choose who you want to be, the more anxious you become about not being enough. The more possibilities for self-actualization there are, the more dissatisfied you feel with who you are. The question that emerges from this maze has no easy answer. How do we reclaim the right to be imperfect, unproductive, mysteriously human in a society that only values optimized versions of existence? A Tibetan monk spends 7 years in silent retreat. When he finally speaks, his first words are, "Time stopped, but I kept moving." When asked what he discovered during so much silence, he replies that the noise wasn't outside, it was inside me. This story reveals something that Byung-Chul considers fundamental to the recovery of authentic human experience. Contemplation is not an activity you do. It is a state you allow to happen when you stop running away from yourself. But there is a crucial difference between contemplation and the thousands of mindfulness apps that promise inner peace in 10 minutes a day. Real contemplation is no longer a personal optimization technique. It is an act of political resistance against a society that profits from your inner turmoil. Han speaks of dead time, moments that produce nothing, optimize nothing, improve nothing. They are periods of pure existence without utilitarian purpose. In the logic of the performance society, this time is wasted. In the logic of human mental health, it is oxygen. Think about the last time you stood still, without your cell phone, without a book, without music, just observing the world around you. Not to officially meditate or practice mindfulness, but simply because you had nothing specific to do. If you can't remember a moment like that, it says a lot about the state of your mind. Genuine contemplation doesn't happen when you decide, "Now I'm going to contemplate." It emerges in the empty spaces between activities, in moments of transition when you're not doing anything in particular but also not running away from anything. It's a state of relaxed alertness, of effortless presence. Han describes it as creative leisure, different from laziness, which is escape, and different from productivity, which is tension. It's an intermediate state where your mind can process experiences, form unexpected connections, and, most importantly, simply exist without justification. This is perhaps the most subversive act you can perform in today's society: to exist without producing value, to be present without documenting your presence, to think without sharing your thoughts, to feel without turning your feelings into content. But the recovery of contemplation is not a romantic return to the past. It's not about throwing away technology and living like a hermit. It's about developing what Han calls contemplative immunity, the ability to maintain a quiet, untouchable core of yourself, even amid the hyper-connected chaos of modern life. This means creating small rituals of opacity, moments in the day where you intentionally become invisible, unavailable, unproductive. It could be walking without music, eating without reading, waking up without immediately checking your messages. These are minimal, almost imperceptible gestures, but they act as anchors for your mental health. The truth is, you don't need permission to stop. You don't need an app to meditate, a course to contemplate, or a guru to teach you how to be alone with yourself. You just need the courage to face the initial discomfort of inner silence. Because yes, it will be uncomfortable at first. Your mind, addicted to constant stimulation, will protest. It will invent urgencies, create anxieties, suggest 1,000 more productive things to do. This is normal. It is the detoxification process of an overstimulated mind. But if you resist this initial discomfort, something extraordinary begins to happen. You rediscover that your own company is not unbearable, that your thoughts, when not constantly interrupted, follow interesting directions, that there is a silent wisdom within you that can only be heard when the external noise subsides. Han realized that our tired society produces a cruel paradox. The more connected we are, the lonelier we feel. The busier we are, the emptier our existence feels. Recovering contemplation reverses this process. The more comfortable you become with your own solitude, the more genuinely connected you feel to the world. Contemplation is not escapism. It's the opposite. It's the courage to be completely present with what is, without needing it to be different, better, more optimized. It's accepting that you are enough exactly as you are, not as a future project, but as a present reality. And perhaps that is the most radical discovery of all, that the person you've spent your whole life trying to become already exists. She has always existed. It was just hidden under layers of noise, urgency, optimization, and performance. When the outside world finally quiets down, when the stimuli diminish, when you stop running away from yourself, you don't find the emptiness you feared. You find a silent and profound presence that never needed to be improved. You find home. The path back to yourself does not involve any apps, courses, or revolutionary techniques. It involves only the decision to stop running from who you really are. When was the last time you felt at home inside your own mind? Write it in the comments. If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step beyond most people. You watch the videos. You reflect on each idea. Now the question is, how far do you want to go with this? If you want to take the next step and apply this knowledge to your life, the codes of the White Rabbit are ready for you. The link is in the pinned comment. Remember, success is a decision. The choice is yours. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.